When you catch your first Deschutes fish, it is electrifying. You just lose sight of everything going on around you. You're shaking and the reel is spinning, and it's incredible.
I like everything about it. I like the water. I like studying the bugs. I like studying the flora and fauna. I like to collect rocks in the shallows that are sparkling.
I come to rivers to fish, but also to just be blown away by what you see of the life around the river.
It takes time to get to know a river, to get to know its secrets.
You develop all these senses because you're out here for so many days, over so many decades, over so many seasons of the year.
We noticed something was really wrong.
One thing that's really obvious is the algal growth on the rocks.
We've had changes in insect timing, we've had changes in insect abundance.
It made me sick to see my fish sick.
One of the things that happens from one generation to the next is that we get accustomed to what things are that we see as normal. The people that start fishing the Deschutes now are going to have a good experience, but it's not the experience they would have had 15 years ago. It's degraded.
We have the most beautiful, wild 100 miles of river.
We need to save it. We need to protect it.
I don't want the current conditions to become what people accept as normal.
It was 1968, I think, when I first saw it. I was sort of awestruck compared to the rivers and creeks I was used to back in the Midwest. And the first time I fished it, it was like overwhelming. I mean, how do you fish a river this big?
The first time I ever really saw the Deschutes was my first posting with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. The thing that struck me then and for many years after that was the quality of the water. I mean, it was just this beautiful blue, green, and white.
We have an incredible wild native trout fishery with trout that are wily and smart and hard to catch. And then we also have the steelhead and salmon that come up the river.
It wasn't unusual to catch 5, 10, 15 fish in a day, or at least to hook them.
Not only do the trout and steelhead and salmon fight well, but the average flow of the river is about 5 miles an hour, which adds to it. When you hook a fish, they take off downstream.
The Deschutes is probably one of the top 5 trout streams to fish in North America. And it has been. It's had that reputation since the guys got out of the war in the 40s.
My wife and I took a 40-something anniversary trip and went to Europe, and we were in London, and we were at Heathrow Airport. And I mean, this is a huge, huge place, people everywhere, and I'm walking through it, going to the men's room or whatever, and a voice from the crowd says, "I was fishing on the Deschutes." And it was the guy that was a client of our little oasis, and he recognized me in the airport and hollered, and I thought, okay, we've been discovered.
There's incredible wildlife. There's osprey, there's bighorn sheep, and there's mule deer and songbirds and red-winged blackbirds. There's so much that this river has to offer.
This river is a jewel in the Northwest and actually in the United States.
I've been fishing the Deschutes for over 40 years now. I started fly fishing when I was 12. And the environment that you end up going to when you're fishing involves a lot of insects. So I was lucky enough to go to grad school and get my graduate degree in aquatic entomology, and then even luckier to get a job. I worked most of my professional career at DEQ. I was manager for the biomonitoring program and for the statewide water monitoring program for a number of years while I was there. My day job was wading out into rivers, sampling aquatic insects. My hobby was wading out into rivers, fishing and imitating aquatic insects. So I guess you could say I've been kind of obsessed with the insect world. I'm going to empty the contents of the net here into the tray and see what we have. Well, one thing I noticed right off is it's very disappointing. There's very few insects in here. Here's a net spinning caddis. Usually they're quite abundant. They chirp underwater. You can't hear it, but they've been people that have recorded it. This large insect here is called a golden stone, and this is probably 2 years old, so it's got another year to grow. Stonefly adults that you see crawling on the trees, they find their mates by drumming on the wood, sending vibrations through the woods. All of these fascinating behaviors and the diversity. I have a real affinity to insects. I'm sorry, anything with 6 legs is my friend. You know, I'm a bug person. I come to rivers to fish, but also to just be blown away by what you see of the life around the river. During a day of fishing in the Deschutes, you'd see pale morning duns emerging and spinnerfalls in the evening. You'd have 3 different caddisflies flying around, swallows nesting on the sides of the river. And that's what grabbed me and never let go. You like doing this?
Love doing this. It's what we live for, huh?
My first day of work on the Deschutes was April 1st, 1977. I got a permanent position as what was called back in the day, a fish and wildlife technician working on the Deschutes research project, collecting data on all the major species on the river. So I had a 30-year career with ODFW. I mean, I've handled literally tens of thousands of resident trout in the Deschutes. I didn't retire as a fish biologist to go golfing or sit around and watch daytime TV. I like to go fishing. In fact, we fished this morning.
Oh, nice one. Whoa.
Jackie is always my first mate on the boat. Fortunately, my wife likes to fish as much as I do.
As a family, we did 3-day river trips every other week all summer. So we spent a ton of time on the lower Pine Tree to the mouth.
So Steve, I think you've floated the river as much as anybody I know. How many times have you been down the lower river?
I'd have to go back and sort of retally, but the last time I did, I'd been from Pine Tree to the mouth probably between 225 and 250 times. And I tell people that I know every rock in the lower 100 miles of the Deschutes River because I've hit them. I've hit them all at once.
We're on the banks of Lake Billy Chinook. The lake has 3 major arms: Crooked River, Middle Deschutes, and the Metolius Arm. This reservoir was formed by the 3 dams on the Deschutes River. The one dam we're behind right now is Round Butte Dam, and that forms Lake Billy Chinook. Below Round Butte Dam is Pelton Dam, and that forms a reservoir called Lake Simtustus. And there's a final dam below that called the Re-Regulating Dam. Since 1964, the 3 dams have been in place.
My name is Mike McLucas. I live on the Deschutes and have since my family bought the Oasis in Maupin, Oregon in 1955. At or about the time that my folks bought the place, there was a lot of dam building going on. You tried to look at it with the eyes of, okay, it's going to generate power. I guess we need power.
One interesting thing historically is that the state of Oregon was vigorously opposed to the project when it was proposed in the 1950s because of the anticipated effects on fish. So the state of Oregon actually sued the Federal Power Commission in order to try to stop the project And that case was decided in Oregon's favor before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Unfortunately, the Federal Power Commission then appealed that case to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court decided in favor of the Federal Power Commission.
I didn't fish it. I can go on what my dad told me. There were tears in his eyes when they decided to build the dams, because he remembered it when it was a paradise. You could go in there and fish for trophy browns, trophy rainbow, trophy cutthroat. It was alive. It was a fishery beyond his ability to describe. And that's all under 300 to 400 feet of water in most cases now.
The lower Deschutes River starts at the re-regulation dam and ends at the mouth where it enters the Columbia River. It's one of the few rivers that has a dominant run of anadromous fish and resident trout.
Anadromous fish is a fish that is born here in the freshwater. Then that fish swims out to the ocean, lives out in the ocean for 1, 2, even 3 years. Then they come back the way they went out, and they find their home river. Steelhead are anadromous, salmon are anadromous. The big difference between the salmon and the steelhead is that steelhead actually don't die after they lay their eggs and spawn. They head back out to the ocean, so they can do this repeatedly as long as the dams aren't impeding them.
They told us when they built the dams that we wouldn't even know they were there. We understand what we have to do. We can get fish above the dams. We have the technology. That's what they said when they built the dam.
The fish ladder that was associated with the project was the longest fish ladder in the world. The people who engineered it fully expected it to be a magical solution to maintaining fish runs despite a 3-dam project in the river.
We lost complete spring chinook runs. Bingo, bango, bongo, they were gone. The only spring chinooker left is a hatchery project on the res that barely works. Steelhead wouldn't climb the ladders. They checked the water temperature in the ladders. Too warm.
They were 3 miles long of just concrete out in the bright sun, no shade, and built against walls like this. These kind of canyon walls, they will just completely absorb all the heat and hold it in all day. You can fry an egg on these walls in the middle of the summertime, and when those steelhead needed to go up there, they couldn't survive. That was never gonna work.
They had abandoned it by 1966, so there was no fish passage from 1964 on, essentially.
And that meant that the Crooked River, the Metolius River, the Middle Fork of the Deschutes, and all their tributaries were blocked. So steelhead and salmon no longer could go and get back to their home waters.
It's a huge basin. But what we're left with is 100 miles below the dams.
Being a young fishing guide, I would spend 275 days a year on the water. I loved it. I loved to work hard. I loved to fish the river all 4 seasons. I met Amy. It was an odd meeting. She'd just come off the world fly fishing tour.
There was a guy giving a presentation on spay casting, and I looked at this bearded guy and I said, "Are you almost done?" Because I wanted to cast a rod.
I asked her to come out and go fishing with me, and she did. She jacked a steelhead on her second cast, and the rest is history.
I always had the Deschutes in the back of my mind while I was traveling, and that's how I ended up moving to Maupin. I mean, little teeny town in the middle of nowhere, and became a fishing guide.
I opened this shop unbeknownst to my wife, and when I told her what I was going to do, she almost had a coronary.
I was like, "We're what?" Because it was kind of like a prison for me to be off the river and in the shop.
But it was a little shop. You know, it was a 450 square foot shop. Leaders, tippet, flies, let's go fishing. Now it's probably one of the larger fly shops in the state of Oregon.
I've met so many people by having that fly shop whom I never would have met while just guiding the river.
Amy is the face of the shop. You know, it's pretty cool that you can meet somebody, share a lifestyle with them, and it's all in alignment.
This river means everything to us. We want to do everything in our power to protect it. The Pelton Round Butte Dam Complex is actually co-owned by Portland General Electric. They own 51%, and the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs own 49% currently. 100% of the operation of the dam complex is by Portland General Electric.
They manage it primarily for power production, but they have to have a license to do that. The license came up for renewal, and they had to apply to FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to get a new license. They did that in the early 2000s. And in 2005, they were granted a new 50-year license.
The FERC set guidelines that PGE had to abide by. One was downstream passage, one was upstream passage, one was to operate the dams as if they're not in place.
The proposal that they came up with to try to convince the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to give them a permit to continue to operate was the selective water withdrawal tower.
The tower is a mixing tower, and it mixes water from the bottom of the reservoir along with surface water.
So the purpose of being able to draw water from higher elevations in the reservoir is to create surface water currents, and the purpose of the surface water currents is to be able to attract fish.
There's no way for fish to get over 3 dams on their own. So the only way you can move adult fish above the reservoir and juvenile fish downstream from the top of the reservoir to the lower river is by trapping them, putting them in a truck, and hauling them around the 3 dams.
The hope was that they would set up a consistent surface current that led juveniles down to the collection facility incorporated in the top of the selective water withdrawal tower. The ultimate goal is to have adults passed over the dam, swim into the 3 tributaries, spawn, their progeny migrate out, be collected at the selective water withdrawal tower, trucked around, go to the ocean, come back.
When the tower went in, this was a way for PGE to get relicensed. It was their way to reintroduce fish into the upper basin. No one really knew what the long-term ramifications were going to be once it was installed and operating, but a lot of hopes were banking on the idea that it was going to be a successful reintroduction for steelhead and salmon above the project.
What was promised is that essentially the tower would benefit fish passage and at the same time benefit water quality.
2009 rolled around. Everyone pretty much knew that the water tower was going to be implemented that year. Lots of scuttlebutt, lots of buzz. No one really knew what we were looking at, what the changes would be.
I was in contact with the PGE biologist at the time, and he said, yeah, there's going to be some changes. And it's like, okay, you know, what kind of changes? If we can get fish passage, that's going to be great. And he goes, well, there could be some negatives to that. And I said, so what would be a negative?
We were fishing out on the Columbia. We came in, pulled up onto the bank there, and I hopped out and I went, this water is warm. What's wrong? There's something wrong here. I shouldn't be able to like stand in this water. I've never been in the river that you weren't just like that when you jumped in.
So I was running trout trips in June, and I remember looking at my depth finder, and it was like almost 70 degrees. And it's like, man, something must be screwed up with my depth finder. So then I had another thermometer. So I threw it in the river and it showed the same thing. You know, it was like, wow.
Our house was right on the Deschutes River. Every single day I could wake up and I could see the river. What I started noticing is the color changed drastically in April when they started drawing more water from the top. the river would just turn this pukey, disgusting green color.
I remember it was Mother's Day, May 9th, and it was 2010. Just 1 year after the tower went in. I drove up to Neenah Boat Launch to put the boat in, and there were salmon flies everywhere. This was way too early for them to be here. And as we continued down the river, I was like, what is going on?
We were on a 3-day steelhead trip, and something was nagging at me the whole trip. There's something wasn't right. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, it was the lack of swallows that was what was missing.
We noticed something was really wrong. And when I say we, it's myself and fishing guides.
All of a sudden, the guides would be talking every night. We'd have guide meetings, usually in the back of the shop by then. And we'd all say, boy, the river has sure changed. The hatches have changed. Water clarity has changed. Something's got to be going on here.
Out of the blue, I get a phone call from Greg McMillan. And Greg was asking me, well, what are you seeing?
Yeah, he called me and he said, you know, there's something going on here, Rick. We've got to look into it. He says, hey, will you come to a meeting in Maupin? And once a group of us started meeting a few times, we said, well, we need to organize and make this official.
So we got together and formed the DRA.
The Deschutes River Alliance is a nonprofit group that was formed 10 years ago to address these very problems that we've been talking about.
The group was very serious about establishing a water quality monitoring program of our own.
We had the scientists on the board. Steve Preble, ODFW, great fella. He understood that when it comes to fish. Larry Markser was on Department of Environmental Quality. Rick Hafley, one of the brilliant entomologists that worked for DEQ for years. We had a team to be able to put the science together.
And so with my experience at DEQ, I modeled our procedures for the equipment, the preparation of equipment, the development of a monitoring plan after what DEQ does.
We have sophisticated equipment in the river at Warm Springs and here at Maupin that take readings every 30 minutes of temperature, dissolved oxygen, and pH.
The data sondes that DRA is using today are the same models that DEQ uses.
Each probe costs about $15,000. And we put those equipment in the river in April, and we take them out in November. And when I started seeing the numbers, I was really surprised. And it wasn't like just like, something looks odd here. It was like, holy crap, something is out of whack here. So the lower Deschutes River gets its water from Lake Billy Chinook.
There are 3 major tributaries, and it's an interesting spectrum from the Metolius, which ranks in the top 5 streams in the state of Oregon for water quality, to the Middle Deschutes, which has water quality problems itself, and the Crooked River, which is kind of on the far end of the spectrum.
Well, the Metolius River, if you haven't seen it, it's an incredibly beautiful stream. This water flows into Lake Billy Chinook at about 45 degrees, 50 degrees year-round. Cold water is denser, and so it starts dropping to the bottom of Lake Billy Chinook when it enters. The warmer water from Middle Deschutes River that flows into Lake Billy Chinook and the even warmer water from the Crooked River stays on the surface.
And because the discharge point in the lower dam is at the bottom, that cold water historically was what was released into the lower river.
The Crooked River doesn't have a lot of flow. It's dammed. It's heavily irrigated out of. It's subject to a lot of man-caused problems, and it's not what you would consider a healthy river.
There's a lot of farms in the upper basin on the Crooked River. With that comes massive amounts of fertilizer.
When that gets into the reservoir, it creates a large bloom of cyanobacteria that will turn this whole surface of the lake bright green. The cyanobacteria release cyanotoxins, and when those are present, it can be hazardous to human health.
Prior to selective water withdrawal tower, all the water in the lower Deschutes was sourced from the bottom of the reservoir. It was cold, clean, and clear.
When they started releasing surface water, they started releasing the nutrient-rich surface water of Lake Billy Chinook. That bright green water goes down into the lower Deschutes.
You can just see it. You can see that it's unhealthy. As a resident to this community, to see that gross water come down all of a sudden, it's disturbing.
Since the tower started operating, one or more of the water quality standards on the lower Deschutes River has been violated almost every day from spring through fall.
Out of 157 days that the DRA was monitoring the pH levels coming out just below the dam, 132 days were in violation of the standards set by the Clean Water Act.
Those standards, those legal standards exist for a reason. The reason is to protect the aquatic environment and the things that live there.
Almost immediately, observations of changes in the river were seen.
The primary parameter that has been violated extensively is pH. And pH is a reflection of whether or not the nutrients in the water are excessive or not. Nutrients sound like a really good thing because, oh great, we're gonna get, more food or bigger fish. Unfortunately, excessive nutrients cause all sorts of problems.
We noticed that there was becoming a carpet mass growing on the rocks and shallows. We took samples and we found out that that was a stalked diatom algae.
It's really taken a strong hold on places where the Deschutes is stagnant on the edges. That cleaner, colder water wouldn't generate that type of invasive growth.
The real problem is that insects that feed on diatoms and algae cannot utilize that stalked diatom material as food. And so the more of that's growing out here, the less habitat is available for the diatoms that insects can eat. Because of the temperature shifts, most of the insect hatches we're familiar with come off in April and May and early June. And by the middle of June, late June, there's not much happening.
Historically, the salmon fly hatch was maxed out June 1st. So everybody planned their fishing trip a week before and a week after to try to be involved with that. Now it's a few weeks earlier. So, okay, if everybody has to adjust their vacation, that's the way that is. But our concern is what's that doing to the fish? Those red-side trout start spawning in the spring and they need those nutrients as far as those big salmon fly insects.
The bug hatches that we used to experience in great numbers, some are gone altogether, may never come back. We don't know. Others are diminished.
We've seen a dramatic decrease in bird life, particularly the number of bird species that we'd normally see riverside. We don't see those because they eat insects.
And we've seen an increase in the abundance of snails and worms, which are very tolerant to more polluted conditions. One of the problems that have popped up with the fish is the black spot disease on the trout.
It's like a risen bump of blackness on the bellies of the trout is where it's most commonly obvious.
The trout didn't just die because there's no longer as abundant aquatic insects. They shift their diet to other things.
Our studies show that there's snails and worms. That's what they're eating.
In the black spot that you see on the trout is an intermediate hope form of the parasite that actually lives in a particular species of snail.
Yeah, it's a little trematode worm.
Yeah, and the worm was never there prior to the nutrient enrichment from selective water withdrawal towers.
There's a particular parasite that's very damaging to Chinook salmon called Serrata nova shasta.
It has proliferated because the amount of polychaete worm, which is the host of sea shasta, the polychaete worm population has absolutely exploded in the Deschutes.
And there's been studies done now looking for the spores of the parasite in the water, which is what the fish ingest when they get infected. It's considered safe if you have 10 spores or less per liter. And they've measured as many as 300.
This parasite has a very high mortality rate in infected fish, and it affects juveniles as well as adults.
The bottom line was you wouldn't want to be a spring Chinook in the Deschutes River because Strattonova Shasta was now so prevalent that you're going to die.
Trout are cold water fish. Salmon are cold water fish. They thrive in water that's 50 degrees, 55 degrees, 60 degrees. And you start getting over 60 degrees and they'll start getting stressed.
I have old fishing journals where I'm like really concerned because the water temperature got up to 66 today because I'm taking temperature all the time. Now it's not uncommon for the water temperatures down by the mouth to be 71, 72 degrees.
The standards were developed to be protective, particularly during spawning season, because that is the most critical time. There's a very sensitive window of temperatures that the eggs need to develop, and if the water temperature exceeds what the standards call for, mortality rates will go up.
Cold water in July and the first 2 or 3 weeks of August at the mouth of the Deschutes is very important for steelhead, particularly migrating up the Columbia. Abundant research suggests that the cold water river mouth sanctuaries for steelhead can duck out of the Columbia, which is warm, and basically run from one to the next, is very important to their future success. And the Deschutes is real important because it's the last one.
Since the tower went in and the water temperatures are close to 70, 71 degrees, the Deschutes is often warmer than the Columbia to the extent that bass and walleye are swimming out of the Columbia and up into the Deschutes as a warm water refuge for them.
Those are both non-native, introduced predators. You know, I didn't fish walleye when I was a kid because they weren't here, but they're here now. So the walleye have the best of both worlds. It's warmer, which they prefer, and there's a ready-made abundant food resource. And after cleaning all those walleye, it turned out that the vast majority of them had juvenile fall Chinook in their guts.
All of this fooling around with flows and temperatures and the impurities that have been introduced from the reservoirs down, you can't continue to have the fishery that we remember that we had with that type of degradation of the resource they have to survive in.
You don't see the thousands of swallows nesting on the banks. You don't see the big spinner falls in the evening. You don't see the nighthawks swooping around all night. It's just really sad. It breaks my heart.
I started fly fishing on the Deschutes River in 1996. Marty taught me how to steelhead fish. We've invested, 22 years in taking people fishing on rivers. It's what we know, and we love it. Are we normal parents?
Yes.
We are? I don't know.
What's normal?
How many river trips have you been on the Deschutes, do you think?
A lot. Like, do I have to put a number to it? My earliest memory, Dad had me like on his shoulders and he had me like reeling in the fish. I think my dad hooked it. It was a team effort. Can I let it go now?
Yeah, you can. We are conservation minded. And we're business owners, and so combining those two, well, our business has supported conservation for many years. We realize the best marketing for our business is really good fish runs. We want to see our fisheries do its best.
What are you concerned about for the future of the Deschutes?
The number one concern is that I want there to be a healthy run of steelhead and trout and anadromous fish for your generation to catch in the future. When I have people call me and I'm trying to set the expectations of what a day of steelhead fishing is going to look like. I tell them the reality. Well, you might catch one or you might catch zero.
So I've seen so many guide services since that tower went in just fold up and leave. A lot of them go other places. I know guides who just moved to Montana to go guide there because they still have great hatches.
It's not sustainable for us. I mean, we're a small family and we have a daughter that's 15. She's going to school here and it's a wonderful school, it's a wonderful community, but how much longer can we sustain this?
If it continues to degrade, if it continues, and without change, it will continue to degrade. Yeah, I think you're going to see some real severe economic impacts.
I just had 6 clients that were in the boat with me. They stayed the night in the Dalles, they had hotel rooms, they went to the grocery store, bought lunch and pop and drinks. They ate dinner at a local restaurant in town. It would be absolutely horrible to have this go away.
It hurts the hotels, it hurts the restaurants, it hurts the fly shots, it hurts the market, it hurts the shuttle drivers that drive our shuttles. It hurts just everybody that lives in this town or all the other towns along the river, and that goes all the way up to Bend.
You know, this brings to my mind the purpose for the tower to begin with. One of the key purposes is to allow reintroduction of salmon and steelhead.
You build a dam complex and you're required to mitigate for the fish losses because of that.
We know from the last 12 years of samples of the fish coming back that is failing. The fish returns are not there.
The project's track record with reintroduction of anadromous fish is pretty darn dismal. Their adult returns are almost always measured in less than 100 and usually less than 25 in many cases. That's hard to call that a success.
Let's just take Chinook salmon, for example. A viable population that has to return and spawn is between 1,000 and 1,300 fish.
I don't think it'll ever be successful with full migration of the juveniles through the reservoir. They seem to be having trouble finding the tower. And the water quality in the top level of Lake Billy Chinook doesn't favor those animals.
Crooked River is a major tributary into the Deschutes Basin. In fact, that would be the primary spawning habitat for wild summer steelhead if reintroduced. The water in the Crooked River is nasty polluted. It's not ready yet for the reintroduction of salmonids. Period, it's not ready. They put the cart before the horse on this one.
If the goal is to restore salmon to the upper river, then we need to take care of the salmonoids and trouts of the lower river. I can't see a program that's going to work if we kill off the lower river, because that's affecting the salmon that will return to the upper river.
We are losing our historical runs of salmon and steelhead in this river. We have watched the decimation of the runs in the Columbia for years because of dam construction and operation. And it's happening right here in Oregon to one of the blue ribbon streams of the state.
Everybody's for reintroduction of salmon and steelhead in the upper basin, but it's pretty clear that they're not getting it done with the use of the tower. It's not getting done because you got to put them in vehicles to get them up above and down out of there. We're into this for well over 10 years and we don't see any return increases.
It was a grand experiment and it taught us a number of things, but when it's all said and done, it will not do what you want it to do in getting anadromous fish above the dams and spread out over the whole basin. And it's ruining 100 miles of what once was the best trout fishery and steelhead fishery in the western United States and maybe well beyond.
After the Deschutes River Alliance started to get this data gathered and we started to see, yeah, there are real problems here, We went to PGE naively thinking that they would want to work with us.
And so we had some informal meetings with PGE and Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. The outcome of those meetings was generally very unsatisfactory.
They just told us to stay out of it.
When folks from the Deschutes River Alliance came to me and showed me the lists of violations of the water quality certification that had taken place over the years, I found it rather shocking and definitely was inspired to get involved.
PGE has a permit. In that permit, they have very clear requirements of what the water quality standards that they have to meet. It's up to DEQ to enforce that permit.
Theoretically, Oregon Department of Environmental Quality is enforcing the Clean Water Act impartially against anybody who pollutes, but that's not necessarily how it plays out. The tower went online in December of 2009. Violations of the water quality certification began almost immediately. PGE and DEQ negotiated agreements that they referred to as interim agreements, where they essentially say, let's pretend that the standards in the certification don't exist and you'll try to hit these targets instead.
Rather than tweaking the project to meet the original requirements, they came up with some agreements that allowed them to relax those requirements so they could continue operating it the same way.
These interim agreements, those are just done in private meetings between DEQ and PGE, where they come up with what seems to be what will make life easier for PGE.
The one that really stood out with these interim agreements is that PGE sent an email to DEQ saying, look, we're not quite meeting our DO requirement and we're going to have to spill water, and that costs us money because it's not going through the turbines to generate power. Is there a standard that we could use that would be less restrictive? And DEQ goes, yeah, we can change the spawning season date requirements for trout, and you can meet the more relaxed requirement when trout aren't spawning. And so that's just a blatant handout to PGE so they don't have to lose money.
Well, when I first started fishing the Deschutes River, if I opened my Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife regulations, it was clearly written that bull trout had to be released unharmed. This is a federally endangered species that lives in the Deschutes River. When the tower was installed, suddenly somebody with a great big magic eraser came in and said, bull trout, a federally endangered species that requires much higher water quality than rainbow trout and salmon and steelhead? Let's erase those from the Deschutes River so they don't live in the Deschutes River anymore.
The Clean Water Act has citizen suit enforcement provisions, and the intent of those is to allow the general public to enforce these laws when the agencies haven't done so. The Deschutes River Alliance sued Portland General Electric under the Clean Water Act in 2016, and unfortunately the outcome was that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals threw the case out of court on jurisdictional grounds.
The court ruled that we had no standing because the Warm Springs Indian Tribe is a standalone nation and free from litigation. It was basically a technicality in terms of who has standing and who doesn't.
All the work we put in, all the time we put into having great data and showing how they were in violation of the Clean Water Act, it never got heard.
What are we willing to accept as a society when private corporations like PGE do what they do? Is there no limit on allowing what they can do, or do we as a culture need to say, wait a minute?
The science shows it's clear, is we have severe water quality problems in the lower 100 miles since the tower went into operation. It's time now to look at those serious water quality issues. We need to solve the problem.
We know the dams are there. They're not going to go away in our lifetime, and we have to live with that. But we don't have to live with the poor water quality that's currently occurring in the river.
PGE can fix the Deschutes River by literally flipping a switch. They can start drawing more water from the bottom.
The fix is so simple. You draw maximum bottom water except during the juvenile migration period, and at that time you're doing that surface water withdrawal at night when the water's the coolest. It wouldn't cost a penny because all that water still goes through the turbine, and it would correct in time a lot of the problems that have been documented in the lower Deschutes.
If they start releasing more bottom water, we're going to see benefits, some benefits immediately with cooler water. And then we're going to start seeing other benefits to the algal community and insect community over the first 2 or 3 years. The seeds for that are still out there. They're just waiting for clean water.
It was stunning to me as a professional biologist how fast these negative changes took place. Well, guess what? Mother Nature's pretty resilient. Those changes can be reversed just as quickly.
We can save this river. We just have to go back to more bottom draw and allow this river to recover, because it will.
It's not like you're having to solve global warming. It's one little slice of the pie that we can address right now.
And fix.
And fix.
The question is, will they be smart enough to admit they made a mistake and correct whatever they can?
We have these amazing anadromous fish. I don't know how many thousands of years they've been around and doing their migration up the Deschutes, and just to think that they could become extinct in our lifetime is appalling.
Water is a public resource. We need to save it. We need to protect it.
When I think about the future of the Deschutes River, I also think about the future of Tegan and what this river is going to look like for her in 10 or 20 years.
If we don't fix it now, how is it going to get fixed? What are we going to be left with?
It's an amazing, amazing river, and we need to do everything we can to get it back to its greatness.
Don't accept what you see now as what's normal. Realize that it can be better, and it can be better very easily. And of course, I hope, for my grandkids' sake and for every kid's sake, that you're going to have those evenings again where the caddis are so thick you can't keep them out of your stew in your campsite. Fish are rising. The bats, the nighthawks, the swallows just overwhelm you in their abundance. And it's a healthy ecosystem. That's what I hope for. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm going to keep coming back and fighting for this river.